made of glass?
Yes.
From Brandy to Lily James, Drew Barrymore, and Hilary Duff, actresses are always honored to wear a Cinderella ball gown. Cinderella's story will still be retold 100 years from now, but the only thing more legendary than the girl herself is her fairy tale dress. With so many to choose from, it can be hard to pick a favorite, but we're going to try. We're going to look at 10 different Cinderella gowns based on historical accuracy, design skill, fairy tale quality, and how much they capture the magic of the original. Then we're going to rank them at the end of this video. So let's hurry into our pumpkin carriage and get started. Let's start with Disney's original Cinderella and work our way up to the more modern versions. Cinderella's classic ball gown might be blue in our memories and every piece of Disney marketing, but the animated dress is actually white and silver. The original Cinderella takes place in mid-19th century France. However, Cinderella's dress takes inspiration from different time periods. The silhouette is a mid-18th century shape, usually achieved with hoops that are flat in the front and back and extend over the hips. Cinderella's gown is given volume with a petticoat-only skirt, which was more popular during the 1830s to 1850s and usually created a completely rounded shape instead of just rounding out the sides. The puffs at Cinderella's hips likely represent looped-up skirts that were popular in the early 1870s, but those usually also had a bunching at the center of the back. As for the accessories, Cinderella's sleeves resemble the high-puffed sleeves of the 1890s, and her long gloves were popular in the 19th century. Cinderella's choker was popular from the 1860s to the 1910s, and you probably even have one at home right now.
Did you ever see such a beautiful dress?
Despite aspects of her dress fitting the 19th century narrative, a lot of Cinderella's styling reflects the time the movie was made. The year 1945 saw dresses getting a lot bigger and fuller, making way for the classic ball gown. Other factors of 1950s style are silhouettes that create a slim figure with a small bust, narrow hips, and a nipped-in waist, all of which are accentuated by the dress. Of course, we can't forget how magical the dress is. What do you notice first when looking at it? There's that sparkle, the volume, and the romantic way it flows when she dances. These are all important aspects of the classic Cinderella ball gown.
It's midnight.
Yes, so it is, but why?
Goodbye.
Rodgers and Hammerstein's Cinderella, starring Brandy, is definitely a fan favorite. Costume designer Ellen Mroznik designed Brandy's gown by combining blue and white details that are clearly based off of the colors Disney marketed. The skirt is made of layers of blue tulle with characteristics of youth and vibrance. This Cinderella also has a mix of time periods. It's set in an old-timey village during no specific year, so the clothing ranges from 19th century peasant chic to gowns you would see in the 40s and 50s. What's your very first impression when you take in this dress? Is it that it looks just like the animated gown turned real? Because that's what we're thinking. It trades the bunching at the hips for peplum and the sleeves drop instead of stay on her shoulders. But otherwise, the dress combines almost all of the elements of the original. To keep things fresh, this version of Cinderella aims for vibrance in all its costumes, from Whitney Houston's fairy godmother to the Wicked stepsisters. Bright-colored outfits are covered in sparkles and interesting prints. No single outfit in this movie is boring.
Tell me, Cinderella, what would you say to capture the prince?
Ever After, A Cinderella Story is unique because it's historical, but not magical. It takes place in France during the 1500s, though the styling isn't always classically French. Costume designer Jenny Bevan didn't design a traditional ball gown for Drew Barrymore. Instead, the dress is off the shoulder, romantic and embellished, and it's really not a ball gown at all. Instead, it's Danielle's mother's wedding dress, as well as her mother's shoes, which finally explains why Cinderella would end up losing a shoe at the ball.
Help me find the owner of this rather remarkable shoe.
The wide shoulders and the wings, though not a part of any other Cinderella gown, do give the look a fairy tale quality, despite the story lacking magic. How do you feel about the wings? There are some historical inaccuracies, like her style of shoe not being popular till the mid-1600s, but the gown definitely looks like something straight out of history. It also has that classic fairy tale quality, even though it has almost nothing in common with Cinderella's gown.
A servant, Henry? Is this some kind of joke?
Made in Manhattan is one of the more modern retellings of Cinderella, where J.Lo gets to look spectacular, even though she always does, in a gorgeous pale pink strapless chiffon gown designed by Albert Wolsky. The shape, hair, and necklace just scream modern-day fairy tale, as well as the soft pink color, which seems to stand out even though it's not very bright. This dress is probably the easiest to see yourself in. It's not too heavy and it's incredibly modern, even though it has very little in common with the classic ball gown. It's sleeveless, unlike most adaptations, and it doesn't have a full skirt.
Look, I've made so many mistakes already. I just don't want to make it worse.
Like Ever After, Hilary Duff's dress in A Cinderella Story is really a wedding dress given to her by Rhonda, her fairy godmother. The gown is white, strapless, and much more modern. This dress has a few things in common with Cinderella's ball gown, like a full tulle skirt and some bling and lace on the bodice that give it a romantic sheen. The only true accessory to this look is the lace masquerade mask, making the dress the true focus on the entire moment.
Love her dress.
When Sam and Austin dance, we can see how lovely the dress is in motion, and this entire look makes up the perfect modern fairy tale. We know you wished you were Sam when you watched her become a princess for the night.
Not now.
What?
I've got to go.
Ella Enchanted completely remixes the fairy tale genre, so it's no wonder that Ella's ball gown is pretty different from the classic. When Ella is magicked into the dress by Lucinda, we can see that it's definitely not her style. The gown starts out as white, sleeveless, and iridescent, with an overlay on the bodice that makes the look seem more romantic. The tight bodice and layered skirt definitely have Cinderella inspiration, but there's not much else they have in common. Is there anything else you notice that really ties the looks together? The dress later gets messed up and Ella ties the skirt up, creating something easier to fight in. She's obviously much happier with her destroyed dress, and we can't blame her. Ball gowns aren't for everyone, and one of the biggest lessons we learned from Cinderella is that the dress does not make the girl.
Take them!
One of the most uncharacteristic Cinderella gowns is the red dress Selena Gomez wears in Another Cinderella Story. This modern dress is loved by fans, but it's not very similar to the classic ball gown. We've never seen a red Cinderella dress, plus the gloves are black and the mask is gold. The dress has a shorter skirt with different length layers of fabric instead of a long full skirt, and it's definitely meant for dancing, especially to tango. Selena does have long gloves, and the mask takes inspo straight from Hilary Duff's A Cinderella Story, but it's hard to find any more similarities. Though this dress is simpler than a fairy tale gown, it's also much more attainable and realistic to the modern story. Could you see yourself wearing it?
Tammy, if I don't get home by midnight, I am dead.
Into the Woods mixes different fairy tales, but Cinderella is one of the movie's standout characters. The movie takes place during the Middle Ages, but costume designer Colleen Atwood used this as an opportunity to combine multiple time periods with modern touches. Cinderella is inspired by the 18th century fashions, especially how campy and over-the-top they were. The dress is gold lame fabric with green hues, cap sleeves, and rich beading. It's a lot less full than most other ball gowns, and tulle was added to the bust. Atwood actually went back to Cinderella's true origins for this one. In the original Grimm fairy tale, Cinderella's slippers were gold, since her dress came from her mother, the willow tree. She wanted to incorporate gold and the willow's colors. Atwood also wanted Cinderella running away from the ball to look even more magical than her dancing, describing her as a butterfly wing when she turns. Do you think the gold color works well here, or did you miss the classic blue?
I didn't attack you, I attacked your shoe. I need it.
After the Ball is a unique adaptation because Katie, who's trying to get back into her father's fashion company after her stepmother and stepsisters frame her, has to attend a fashion ball while alternating between a gorgeous gown and being dressed as a man, since she's busy disguising herself to get intel on what her wicked stepfamily is up to. The dress in this version is strapless, like Made in Manhattan and A Cinderella Story, but also even shorter than Another Cinderella Story. It has a bejeweled bodice and a tulle skirt, but resembles a performance dress, like ballet, more than a ball gown. But the color, pattern on the bodice, and material are modern fairy tale princess, and her blonde updo is classic Cinderella.
Took my idea.
Costume designer Sandy Powell was hard at work designing the unique dress Cinderella would wear in the 2015 live-action remake. To convey weightlessness, the voluminous skirt was composed of more than a dozen fine layers of fabric in different shades of blue, turquoise, and lavender. Underneath those layers, Lily James wore a corset and petticoat. 9 versions of the ball gown were created, each featuring 10,000 Swarovski crystals and more than 270 yards of fabric. Each dress took 18 tailors and 500 hours to complete. This look echoes some of that 1950s inspiration in the first film by having an extremely nipped waist and slight figure, as well as a very full skirt. Since there was no specific time period or country, there was a lot more freedom with the dress. The dramatic shoulders take inspiration from many other adaptations, as well as the color, which is the most vibrant blue of all the ball gowns. But the butterflies help make the dress more youthful, as it's important to remember that Cinderella is still young.
It's made of glass.
And why not?
Time for the ranking. We're going to start at number 10 and work our way up to the very best dress. Selena looks fire in this red dress, but other than the story being loosely inspired by Cinderella, there's not much about it that screams fairy tale. Katie's dress is a little more magical, but it's definitely not heavily inspired by Cinderella's iconic look. JLo's pink dress has very little in common with Cinderella's, but it gets number 8 on this list for how much it makes her look like a modern-day princess.
It's over, baby.
Hilary Duff stuns in this wedding dress turned ball gown. It gets points for the full skirt and romantic bodice, but it's no classic Cinderella. Ella's dress has enough in common with Cinderella's to look like something she might actually wear, but it's not quite magical enough to make it into the top 5. This one gets points for being inspired by the original Cinderella fairy tale. It's gorgeous and historically accurate enough, but it doesn't have much in common with the classic Cinderella gown. Drew Barrymore's iconic dress is a fan favorite and also one of the most unique gowns. It's pretty historically accurate, and those wings make it truly magical.
Then you're not engaged.
I'm not.
Of course, the classic gown that we all know and love would have to make it somewhere in the top of the list. The dress blends a few different time periods, but it's one of the most magical of the bunch, and it's the first one that comes to mind when you think Cinderella. Brandy stuns in her Cinderella gown. Not having a specific time period helps give the dress's design more freedom, but it still seems magical enough to be part of a fairy tale. Finally, the top spot goes to Disney's live-action remake. A big factor here is how much work went into its creation. And since it doesn't have to fit into a specific time period, it's both classic and modern. Basically, this dress is a dream. What's your favorite Cinderella ball gown? Are there any other fairy tale fashions you'd like to see us talk about next? Let us know in the comments. Don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe to The Things for more. Thanks for watching!